And I think it explains once again, this is yet again another example of government failure. Had they not limited the liability, odds are that BP shareholders would not have allowed them to drill where they did, not to mention that BP would not.
But doesn't the government's limitation of liability... You know me, I'm a libertarian, but you just laid out the reason why in certain circumstances you may need government. Just think about what you said before. You said Exxon basically weaseled out of the Valdez cleanup. No. Exxon paid the Valdez cleanup. Right. What was the liability? The Supreme Court, the liability was about $20 billion. The Supreme Court allowed $5 billion in punitive damages. So Exxon paid every nickel and more. As a result of that, Exxon lobbied the Congress so that it could weasel out in the future. My attack is on that limitation of liability statute, which is like a safety net. If you know you only have to pay $75 million in damages, Stuart, you put the $75 million in a bank account, and then you can be as negligent as you want.
Why did the BP executives agree to an open-ended liability situation where they take their money and put it in the control of the White House, give it to political control?
How much cash do they have on hand?
I don't care.
$20 billion is a drop in a bucket to these guys.
When we come back, we'll talk about the cash they have on hand. We'll also talk about the cash that the federal government has blown in Fannie and Freddie. The president addressed the nation last night amid growing concerns how he's handled the BP oil spill. He vowed to make the company pay for the damages it caused and is committed to rebuilding the Gulf Coast.
We must make a commitment to the Gulf Coast that goes beyond responding to the crisis of the moment. I make that commitment tonight.
With me now, more on the president's primetime address and how the public is responding to it. Pat Cadell, former Democratic pollster and Fox News contributor, and Mike Flynn, editor-in-chief at Big Government. Mike, first to you. What should the president have said, if anything, last night? I mean, he's late to the game. BP has to pay the bill. But does he have the right to steal $20 billion of their cash and decide how it's going to be distributed?
Judge, first, let me give you a compliment, because the way you set up this entire segment at the very beginning provided a perfect synopsis for how we got to this place. It was incompetent, intrusive government and crony capitalism that got us here. What the president should have said last night is, here's the 3 things I'm going to do to plug the leak. I mean, this is an unserious administration. You've got the worst environmental disaster in our history going on right now. Right. And the president thought this was a time to, one, beat up on the company and also talk about our long-term energy policy. No, I'm sorry. There's 60,000 barrels of oil a day spewing into the Gulf right now. The speech should have been how we're going to contain that leak.
Pat Cadell, how bad has the president suffered from the perception that he is late to the game in addressing this, and how well or poorly did he do last night?
Well, I think he's suffering a great deal. I think he was already hanging for some months at about 46, 47% Rasmussen, around that number with Gallup. What's happened is, in the last several days, and I don't know how much he corrected last night, it won't be very much because he got criticized, but his numbers on handling this crisis are going down. Judge, I was there for the Iranian hostage crisis. I know this. This is bleeding competence every day. And what Mike said is exactly right. The problem is that people want to see him not have commissions, not see how he's doing the blame, although they're really down on BP with good reason, in my opinion, his biggest contributor from the oil industry. But what they really want is him to do something about stopping the leak. Mobilize the government. Mobilize the government. For 60 days, they've basically done nothing.
Mike,
our allies have offered to help. They've ignored it.
Mike, what can the government do?
He acts like this is a seminar.
All right, Mike, the government has zero experience monitoring a well in 5,000 feet of the ocean. BP has zero experience monitoring a well in 5,000 feet in the ocean because no one's made them drill in water that deep. What can we expect to happen?
Well, no, the federal government made them drill in water that deep. Let's be clear about that.
Right.
No, they don't have experience. But look, the Dutch have offered assistance. The British have offered assistance. There's been a lot of international assistance offered. The federal government has not accepted that assistance because of some antiquated law passed in the 20s and 30s for labor unions, the Jones Act. We have denied the use of international ships.
Pat?
I'm sorry.
There's nobody in charge. There's nobody in charge. Mike's right. There's nobody in charge. The people have offered things. Look, we have people we've saw on this network, people who have offered and come up with ideas, whether it's hay or whether it's other things that work. There's no effort to do this. They didn't mobilize the governors. They didn't mobilize the Navy. Let me just put it this way. The country, this is not a PR problem. It's not a communication problem. It's a leadership commander-in-chief problem. And people wanted somebody. Let me just put it this way. Let me just say, whether you like Giuliani or not, Rudy Giuliani, close your eyes a minute and imagine how he would have handled it. If the president says this is like 9/11, imagine Giuliani. He would not be sitting around appointing a commission.
Why is the left angry at the president?
Let me make one quick point.
Pat, why is the left angry at the president this morning?
Well, they're angry because they realize that he is offering nothing. I mean, watching MSNBC or reading what they said last night, it's like watching the Vatican newspaper Observatore Romero criticize the Pope. I mean, they are on top of him, like, because he's unfocused. He keeps thinking it's political. And if you think that's bad, read Rolling Stone. Read the New York Times. You think George Bush was president, reading how the New York Times in the last 48 hours has attacked
Mike Flynn, thank you for joining us. For a true libertarian, free market perspective on BP and the failure of big government, tune in this weekend to Freedom Watch, Saturday 10 and 8 p.m. Eastern, and Sunday 7 and 11 p.m. Eastern on the Fox Business Network. Next, Glenn's new book is called The Overton Window. But do you know the history of this political scale? Glenn explains it coming up.
There are two ways to go through life. You can be the kind of person who loves to eat sausage and you just don't want to know where it came from, or you're the type of person who has to know how the sausage is made. If you watch this show, chances are you're the second type. Personally, I struggle with this concept, not on sausage. I don't want to know. But on the way our world is going, I think it would be a lot easier to tune everything out. But that's unfortunately not the right answer, because we're not going to solve anything that way. So I've done it, and you have too, dug in, done your homework. And we've seen how the political sausage is created. And it's more disgusting than I ever even thought. And yes, you will find a shoe or a finger in it once in a while. In doing my research on what's happening in America, and also for my new thriller, The Overton Window, I came across the ingredients that they put in the political process called the Overton Window theory. Now, you may not know it by name, but you have had it used on you over and over again. And I want to expose exactly what it is and how it works. With me now is Joseph Lehman, president of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, which is the Michigan think tank that named the technique the Overton Window, which was actually Joe Overton.
Joe Overton was Mackinac Center vice president. He was a policy strategist who wanted a way to show how think tanks influence policy. They don't vote in the legislature, but they have influence, and so he needed to show how it worked.
Okay, and this is, well, show me with education, because we have a graphic here of education in the Overton Window.
At any given point in time, a politician can't choose any policy he wants. He can only choose those things that the voters will find acceptable, or else he risks getting unelected.
Okay.
And so here's a spectrum that shows possible policies in education. At one extreme, you might have private schools are outlawed and only government indoctrination in government schools.
Okay.
Over here, you might have no government schools whatsoever. All right, now, where we are today is somewhere in the middle. Around here, we've got a little bit of public school choice in most states. You can choose from a couple different public schools or maybe even a charter school. Now, that window has shifted. There were actually policies, proposals in the 1920s proposed by the Ku Klux Klan to outlaw private schools. But where the labor unions would like us to be today, particularly the teacher unions, they want us to be down here. You have just regulations on private schools that are very heavy and no school choice at all. You go to the government school you're assigned to.
Okay.
But what parents want is they want choices. Parents want things like vouchers and tuition tax credits.
Right. So how do you get, how do you move the window?
You move the window. If you're a think tank, you focus on facts and you focus on logic and persuasive arguments. You explain, for example, this is how vouchers would work. Here's why the things they say about vouchers aren't as bad. But there are other things that can influence the window as well.
Okay. So can a politician move the window?
In rare cases. See, politicians are very good at knowing what the people will accept and what they won't. Sometimes you get a politician like a Ronald Reagan who can actually bring the people along with him.
Let's go with, is the next one welfare? Do we have welfare?
We do have a welfare.
Bring up welfare, because I think what we've done is welfare, we have started moving past, and healthcare as well, outside of the Overton window. Am I right? Am I right? It feels like that.
In some cases we are.
Okay.
That's right. But it's moved a huge deal.
Okay.
For example, at one extreme you could have, there isn't any such thing as private charity.
Which the Obama administration tried to do when he first got into office.
Some of them want to make private charity harder. They want to take away tax deductions for charity. They want to ladle more regulations on top of charities.
Okay.
At the other extreme, as you've got welfare only as a last resort, and all assistance is private.